All right, the second question is a hypothesis test question, and we're given some information here on the left, the null and the alternative statements right here, and then some information about it, the sample size, x bar, s, and alpha of 0.10. All right, so in this case we've got the first part of the question says this hypothesis test is, what is it? Is it upper tail, lower tail, or two-tail test? And again, as we've discussed, we want to look at the alternative statement that's pointing to the upper tail. So it's an upper tail test, one tail. And what that means is that the rejection region is going to be up here in the upper tail. Okay, so that's the first part of the question. The critical value for this test, for this we're going to need to look at the student's t-table. Just as a reminder here, since we weren't given sigma, we were given the sample standard deviation. It's a student's t-distribution. And so we're going to look at that now. And so let's zoom in on that. We had alpha of 0.10. We've got a one-tail test in the upper tail. So let's take a look here at the table. So we've got a one-tail test, and we've got one tail and a 0.1 alpha. And our degrees of freedom, if I remember right, there were 20 in our sample size, so degrees of freedom is 19. N minus 1 is our degrees of freedom. And we just line this up then, and here is our T of alpha value, 13277. Alright, so let's adjust this again. Okay, so T of alpha equals 1.3277. Okay. State the decision rule for this test. Okay. Now that we have our critical value, we would say if the test stat is greater than 1.3277, reject null, otherwise do not reject. Okay, so that what that means here is that 1.3277 is this point right here, and anything above that is in the rejection region. Okay. So that's our decision rule. What is the value of our test statistic? Okay, so let's take a look really quick here. Test statistic will be calculated using this formula right here. X bar minus mu over S over the square root of n. Okay, so let's make some room to do that. So test stat then, okay, test stat is T equals X bar, which was 71.2, minus mu, 70. We get that from the hypothesis statements, over S was 6.9, over the square root of 20. Okay, so when we calculate that, what we'll get is 1.2 divided by 6.9 divided by the square root of 20. And when I do that on the calculator, I get 0.7778, or you could round that up to 0.78. So that is the result of our test. So we set our rejection region using the T of alpha right here. Then we say anything above that, we will reject the null. Anything that's not in that rejection region, we will not reject the null. So in this case, let's go back to the question here. Based on our answers above, we will not reject the null because our answer of 0.77 falls below the rejection region up here in this part of the curve.